Audit and Standards Committee meeting of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening and the meeting will be recorded. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Would you please switch mobile phones to silent? I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. The public record of the meeting. There's legislation to allow the public to film, record, or use social media at council meetings. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. Thank you. To move on, I'm Councillor James Mason, Vice Chair, and I will chair this meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. I confirm we have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance tonight. Ed de Coverley, the Chief Executive, Dawn Garton, Director for Corporate Services, Lydia Rusling, Director for Place and Prosperity, Clive Tobin, Assistant Director for Governance and Democracy, Rachel Ashley Cornt, Chief Internal Auditor, Tom Pickwell, Legal Services Manager, and Adam Green, Senior Democratic Services and Scrutiny Officer. If this is the royal family, they wouldn't let you be all in one place at one time, I don't think. Never mind, here you are. In attendance via remote connection, we have Lisa Morrissey of Grant Thornton and Neil Preece, Grant Thornton, and they're both for item 4, which is the audit, external audit report. So if I could move on to the meeting proper. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for Councillor Higgins, the chair. That's why I'm chairing tonight. Are there any other apologies?
Tim Webster sends his apologies as well. He's stuck in traffic.
Thank you, Simon. And for Councillor Higgins, Councillor Thwaites is in attendance as a substitute for Councillor Higgins. The minutes. I'd like to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of September 2025. Can I ask, are there any comments regarding the minutes as put forward? No? Can I ask for a proposal of the minutes? Councillor Atherton and the seconder, Councillor Sharp. Could I have a vote, please, on the acceptance of the minutes? 6-4. You still, as far as I know, you're still allowed to vote even though you weren't here. So that's 7-4. Okay. Those against? Any abstentions? It's 1 abstention. So that's 7-4. None against, 1 abstention. Am I correct in that? Thank you. Declaration of interest. Can I invite members who have a declaration of interest to make? Would they please make them now? No declaration of interest. Thank you. And to move on very quickly to item number 4, which is the External Audit Interim Annual Report for 2024-2025. The external auditor, who are in attendance via stream, will give an introduction to the report, and then I'll go on to the debate. So thank you. Can I ask for your report, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So if I can just do a quick introduction and give you a quick update on the external audit, and then I'll hand over to Neil to go through a bit more detail in the auditor's report. So in relation to our financial statements audit, that's currently ongoing and it's quite advanced. We are on track in line with our plan to produce our audit findings report and get that to officers in advance of the Christmas break. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the finance team for their prompt response and good working papers to support the audit. We intend to present our audit findings report and give our opinion on the accounts in January, and the audit findings report should be presented to the meeting on the 25th of January. That is a month in advance of the backstop date, which is the 27th of February. So that's really good news that we're, a month in advance of that date. So going on to the report on the agenda today, this is our interim auditor's annual report, which brings together our work undertaken at the council for the year, of which a core element is our commentary on the council's value for money arrangements. So I'll just hand over to Neil to take us through some of the highlights in that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, good evening, everybody. Firstly, thank you very much for facilitating the ability for us to present online. I work as we're sort of a fairly disparate team, so I work on clients all over the country, so we don't always get the opportunity to present the work that we've done. So thank you for that. Picking up Lisa's point, I'd also like to thank Dawn and Naomi, who've been fantastic in supplying us with the information that we've requested in a timely manner, so we're able to present this report tonight, which is great. Very briefly, the work that we and all public sector audit firms do in value for money is determined by the National Audit Office. They set a code of audit practice which is approved by Parliament every 5 years. The current code requires us to report and comment in 3 different areas, which is the financial sustainability, governance, and economy efficiency and effectiveness in the use of resources. And then for each of those 3 areas, there are a number of what you could call them key lines of inquiry or exam questions, which we've responded to in the report and just summarised the work that we've done. This is the 12th local authority report that I've written for 24-25, and it's the most positive. So you should be very pleased with the position that the council's in. Vice Chair, I don't propose to go through the report in detail. The key messages are on page 21 of the key pack of the pack in the executive summary. But in brief, we have only one improvement recommendation, which is the lowest level of recommendation we can make. That is on page 31 of the pack, and officers have provided a response which is on page 43. That recommendation, which you won't be at all surprised to know, is around the financial challenge that this council, along with virtually every other council in the country, and I'll make no political point there, but virtually every single council that we work with is suffering financial challenges and having to make difficult decisions. At the moment, you're in a reasonable position. You're certainly in a much better position than a lot of other councils that I've worked with. But we're just sort of keeping that on the radar, just to make sure that no one takes their eye off the ball with that, which I'm sure won't happen. But we have updated our recommendation from previous years just to bring that up to date. So what that means is that for the governance and 3Es aspects, there are no recommendations at all. All you'll see is a sea of green. Although we have highlighted trying to sort of add value and bring learning and good practice that we find across the country. We've just highlighted one area where, if the council wished, you could seek to do more, but we haven't made an improvement recommendation because there's no weakness in the arrangements. Chair, I know you talked about leaving time for debate and questions, so I will, if it's okay, assume that members have had opportunity to read the report, and I will pause there, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's most encouraging. I have to say, I must congratulate the officers on a really good report. It's to hear that you've done 12 and we're probably the best is extremely encouraging. I'm very proud to represent the council on that basis. I did notice, I have to say, obviously it is the only thing that I picked out, I have to say, was the, I think it's called a pipeline of savings that need to be built up over a number of years, and that seems to be a recurring theme from last year. I just wonder whether or not I could ask Dawn if she'd like to comment on that, because that seems to be a tough ask in this day and age, and ongoing. I think we may struggle with that. I don't know whether Dawn can flesh that one out for me, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think as Neil said, you know, we're not that dissimilar to every council across the country that are all struggling following austerity and then the funding cuts, demand on services, inflationary increase. I could go on really. The council has a really good track record of identifying savings. We've always been a highly efficient council, and that's why we've managed to balance out our budget for a number of years and over a considerable time. So we've got a whole host of things that we've saved in the past. I think it's a sign of the times that it's now really difficult to continue to rely on efficiencies without actually making cuts in services in order to balance the budget as well, and also meet continuing increasing demand. So I think, you know, what's been found by external audit is just symptomatic really of many councils. So that's not to say we're becoming complacent. The financial sustainability plan, the pipeline, includes any kind of quick wins that we can get, but also includes a number of larger sort of areas. Some members may recall we had LGA in to do a financial sustainability review, and they highlighted that really to make significant savings now, the one area remaining was property. And we do continue to work on the asset development programme with a number of schemes in progress or being assessed. And we also have the Stockyard Love project as well. They're not short-term projects that are going to see a saving quickly. So some of those longer-term schemes are in progress, but it does continue to be extremely challenging to make the necessary savings without service cuts.
Thank you, Dawn. That's very comprehensive. Thank you. Is there any member who would like to debate, ask questions on this item? That's very heartening. That shows a very, very healthy report. Thank you very much. This is for noting. Can I note? Is it acceptable to note the report? I think everyone's happy to note it. Thank you. Then we'll note the report. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is the car parking charges lessons learned review, and this is why most of the people are here tonight. I was asked to introduce the report, and I think I wanted to introduce the report to you anyway, from a point of view of best use of our time on the report, and I was minded, having thought about it, of where we left off on the report, and I didn't really think it was necessary to rerun a lot of the questions, answers, debate that we had on the previous, because we arrived at a position. I've made a few notes here of my own, and to summarise, we'd already received a briefing from the officers assembled, and it was very comprehensive. And I thought the report was very comprehensive. There are questions arising from the report, and there always is. I've got no problems with that, and quite rightly so. But we did debate it. The reason that it was deferred, and this is a deferral, was because of it was unfortunate that halfway through the questioning, our chief internal auditor had to leave the meeting, and therefore members around the room were unable to ask questions. That some asked questions and some didn't. So we deferred it on the basis that people or committee members could ask questions in writing and put them in writing, and then there would be answers given in writing, and then come back to this meeting as a deferred item. I think that was the position that we left it in, and I think everyone was quite quite happy with that with that proposal. And these questions are fully laid out in Appendix B, and the answers have been grouped together because obviously there's some measure of overlap between the questions that committee members are asking, and you would expect that, and indeed some of the questions that I was asking, because I was one of the questioners, and indeed that came down to 4 questions. So having said all that, I don't want to labour the report. I think for that reasoning and those reasoning, I'd like to start with Appendix B, and to see whether or not that members have had a chance, well, I'm sure they have, to look at the questions they've asked, and then to go on to, if there are any further clarifications or questions arising from Appendix B, then we should take that as an item. Just let me finish, Ian, thank you. For my part, I was a question. I've read the answers in Appendix B, and I'm content with the answers given. If people need to look at the questions that I raise and then follow them on, I'm quite happy to do that. But for my part, I am content. Councillor Atherton.
So I'd just like to mirror that, Chair, please. I asked quite a few questions, and as you say, the answers have been grouped together, and I'm content that the answers provided do satisfy my concerns on the night.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very gratifying. I do the other protagonists, shall I say, were Simon, Councillor Orson. Have you a view on the questions that you asked? I know that Councillor Webster's not here, and so you may and notice that your questions were very similar. So you may have some crossover.
Yeah, no, I've spoken with Councillor Webster, and both of us are contented with replies. So thank you very much for your time.
Is there anyone else who would like to enter into the debate on this or ask a question that arises from Appendix B? I'd very much like to hear it. If there's not, we can move on. Councillor Thwaite.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, yeah, I was only just reading through the answers to all the questions, but there was one bit that I still wanted to. It's a combination of the answers to the different questions. It sort of starts with your question about systemic failure and the response about you've done the investigation through that and you don't see it as a systemic failure. But is that based on this occurrence, or is your wider knowledge of the whole wider council?
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, so I'd say it's a combination of the two. So clearly the findings from this, as I've mentioned in the responses to the questions, were quite specific to this particular area and the circumstances that unfolded during the timeline that we established. Clearly, I also have that wider overview. We do review a number of projects. We look at a number of different systems. So again, that cumulative knowledge is helpful for me in reaching that conclusion as well.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow on from that, the reason I'm raising this is because, I mean, some of the original error was because of the handover, mistakes in the handover, unfortunate timing and all the rest of it. But there's going to be a lot of handovers in the next 2 to 3 years of operations and systems and that sort of thing. So again, it's whether the actions to rectify this have been put in place for the future, and whether that covers it. Didn't quite answer that question to say, yeah, we've rectified it so this one doesn't happen again, but it's where other handovers happen, especially as LGR's coming down the line sort of thing, that different parts are going, and if there is little bits missed off, these are the sort of things that can happen with that was the real question.
Well, from my perspective, I read the action plan, and I read the way that the action plan has been put together, and the various steps of the action plan to interface between departments and interface between senior officers. But would the chief executive or the director like to comment on that particular point?
Yeah, happy to, Chair. I mean, the action plan is designed to build in some safeguards which are about general principles and learning for the future. And I certainly made the point at the last committee meeting about the risk we and all councils face as we go into LGR as potentially our capacity becomes more stretched. It's important we have these safeguards in place. Some of the steps that have already been taken around the additional programme boards, the additional procedure notes, the various things we've put in place, I think will safeguard on this issue. And one of the things we've already undertaken as a group of senior leaders and with our managers is to make sure the lessons from this experience are learned across other aspects as well. So we will take that into any future changes that we have to contemplate. And we've also given a commitment to have a 6-monthly review as well to check that the things we've said are in place and are in place now are still in place in 6 months' time. So that's an additional check that we'll make. Thank you, Chair.
So you're content, Councillor Thwaites. Thank you. In that case, then, is anyone, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question relating to Councillor Atherton's question regarding the not interviewing members of staff who had left the employ of the council. And I understand the answer given, you know, and I understand the process. The question isn't so much about that. The question is, were any questions relating to the investigation left unanswered because some people were not interviewed?
Chair, thank you. Clearly, we can only conclude on the information that we have from the officers that we've spoken to. Whether speaking to other officers would have established any other information, when we would know at this point. There was nothing that I felt I couldn't conclude on based on having any gaps in the areas that we'd covered. I think what we got to was establishing the root cause of the issues, and we understood what safeguards could have prevented what happened. So I think we haven't had any issues as a result of that. So I'm comfortable that we've been able to reach a useful and value-adding outcome on the review.
Thank you, Rachel. You're content, Councillor. Is there anyone else would like to comment, debate, question on so far? Thank you very much. That's very comforting. Yes, I thought that the answers were very good, and I have to say I wouldn't want to unpick some of the questions that were, and particularly even the ones that I raised were slightly obtuse. I have to say that. But thank you very much for that. The recommendation is that the committee notes the outcome of the lessons learned review. The action has been taken by management to address the findings. Can I say that the committee is happy to note that report? Then it's noted. Thank you. I understand that the chief executive is a very busy person, and the director. Would you like to leave at this point? Well, you can't. Thank you. I'll give you 5 minutes to. Let's move on to item 6. This is the internal audit progress report. I think we're all very familiar with this report. Can I ask Rachel to introduce it, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you say, this is in the familiar format to the committee, so I'll just take you through briefly the key sections as usual. So the internal audit plan is provided from page 85 of your pack, which shows the status of all of those assignments for this year and the outcome of those if being completed. The committee will note that one audit report has been finalised since the last committee progress update, which was in relation to risk management. So that's an area that should be of interest to the audit committee, given your roles and responsibilities in relation to risk management. So hopefully that's a useful review for you as well. So we have given a good level of assurance on the control environment on the basis that the performance and risk management framework that was approved in 2024 has established a comprehensive control environment, which has been aligned with good practice. And we were also able to see, for example, that there were clear links with the council's strategic objectives, which gives us assurance over how that's been developed. We have also then recognised the work that's taken place to implement the new system for logging and recording risks, which is also taking that in a positive direction in terms of facilitating the delivery of that framework. In terms of the compliance element, we did identify some inconsistent use of risk logs on projects in particular. So we have made some recommendations around those to ensure consistent logging of risks and how those are reported. And we've also recommended that the framework and the supporting documentation be more readily available on the council's intranet, so that it's available to officers to inform their ways of working, and then to implement things like version control, just to make sure that we're always working to the latest version. So overall, we've given a low organisational impact with a moderate assurance rating on compliance, primarily on the gaps around the risk registers for projects, as I mentioned. So also within the report is a reference to an amendment to the internal audit plan, which was agreed subsequently following the last committee meeting, where there was a discussion under the any other business item around section 106. So we have swapped out the audit originally planned on information requests and reallocated those days to an audit of section 106 monitoring, which you'll see is now in the audit plan for you later in the document. Section 106 had already been on our reserve list, so we've just moved that up in terms of priority to get it onto the audit plan. In terms of the planned audit and information requests, we have deferred that to next year on the basis that the system for handling those requests is about to change. So there would be greater value for us to review that once the new controls are in place. So hopefully that's a positive amendment to the plan during this year. There's also an update on the implementation of audit recommendations. So on page 89 of the pack, Appendix 2 is an update on the implementation of actions. So we had 9 actions closed as at the time of producing this report since the last committee meeting, and we have 21 which remain overdue, which is a little higher than the last update, but the number of high priority recommendations has halved, with one of those being implemented since the last update, which members will note from the exempt appendix as well, where you now only have one overdue action, which is over 3 months overdue and is of a high priority. So also within the packet, page 10 of the appendix, page 90 of your pack, is the latest performance information in terms of customer feedback, and that will continue to be updated throughout the year, and that is aligned with our new standards that we abide by and our latest internal audit strategy as well. So I'd be happy to take any questions, Chair, on the detail, and that's just a walkthrough of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Just before I open it up to the floor, there is on this report an exempt appendix. I'm required to ask the meeting if that needs to be debated at some point. If so, I should need to close the meeting at some point for that to be debated. Does anyone want to open up Appendix B, which is annexed to this report? Or no? Thank you. That suffices. Are there any questions we could put, or you'd like to put to Rachel on this matter? Then I would. I just like to congratulate ourselves on the direction of travel of some of these high priority recommendations, because I have to say, when we first picked it up, when I can remember going back some years now, I can say I've been on the council for some years, which seems incredible, that it was quite high, and some of them need to be taken down, and the direction of travel has been steadily down and down and down. And I know there's been meetings with SLT and SLT members, and they've grasped this. Well, it appears that they've grasped this problem, and now to have only one high priority recommendation, I think you said, I think it's very laudable, and thank you very much. I'd just like to record that. Okay, thank you. Then the recommendation is, if we can proceed to that the committee notes the proposed approach and accepts the report and notes the report. Am I going to say that? Thank you. That will be noted. Thank you very much. Now We now move on to item 7, which is the internal audit plan development. This is a recurring item where we need to set our stall out for the year next year, and I wonder if anyone would like to speak to this. Indeed, even suggest to Rachel what might be included in the plan. And can you introduce it, Rachel, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is just a brief paper just to introduce the process for developing the internal audit plan for 2026-27. So it's just to inform you as a committee on the process that I will be following over the next few months to develop a draft audit plan, which will come back to this committee for review and approval. That will then inform our work for the year ahead. It's also to give you assurance that the process that we will be following is in line with the global internal audit standards and how we're aligning with that, and just sets out the key stages. So I don't intend to go through it in detail. Essentially, we're looking at developing a risk-based internal audit plan that will add value to the organisation and supports the delivery of the council's objectives. So we of course look at things like risk registers. I will consult with senior leadership team around their risks and their priorities for the year ahead. We also look at previous coverage to look at our audit universe, as is referred to in the internal audit standards, which is essentially all of the areas we could audit, which is extensive in any local authority. But obviously we want to prioritise our resources in the right areas. So at the end of that, we come to a process where we refine that down and develop what we propose as the audit plan for the year ahead. Within that list is consultation with members of this committee, so this also triggers the start of that process. So as I've mentioned in the report, I'm happy to receive any areas from members of the committee that you would like me to consider as part of development of that internal audit plan. All of those will feed into the process and be risk assessed around other areas. And I don't expect all of those areas to be proposed this evening, and I'm happy to receive those outside of the meeting if the committee members are happy to do so. So yes, I'm happy to take any questions or suggestions at that point, Chair. Thank you.
There you have it. We're happy to take suggestions. And Councillor Atherton.
Thanks, Chair. Is it appropriate, Rachel, to include local government reorganisation activities in forthcoming audits?
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, so luckily I do have the experience, having been in Northamptonshire. We have been there and done it from our perspective of going through the transition of local government reorganisation. So we've been there, I suppose, in terms of the risks and things to look out for, which is useful, and that's something that we can bring to the table in terms of the audit plan. One of the things I would say is that clearly during that process, and as we've already said this evening, it does potentially put pressure on existing resources. So sometimes it almost becomes more important to look at some of those standard controls and some of those other processes that are the business as usual that might be resources might be diverted from when focusing on the LGR process. But there's also potentially advisory work that we could offer as well as during that process, just to try and make sure that we've got everything ready for that process and we're doing what we can in advance. And that might be more in, as I say, an advisory capacity rather than audit work. I'm not sure there's anything we could test as such at this stage, but I think we might want to factor in more days around advisory support, which we can then use as we need to within the audit plan.
Be happy with that. I think it's an excellent point, actually. That's I'll board down.
Sorry, for now, yes. I think we need to see what comes out of Whitehall first, and then we can maybe revisit what we do and don't need to audit, and indeed whether an audit is the appropriate way to monitor. It may be scrutiny, it may be we set up a committee specifically for LGR, but we need to not lose sight of it, I think. But yeah, for now, content. Thanks.
A good point. I'll wait to see what comes out of Whitehall. We'll see what transpires. Anyone else would like to? Alison?
Thank you. I suppose it's less of a question and more of a kind of a steer, as we are like we've got overarching things that we're focusing on, the LGA reorganisation, etc. We've got some big issues. Are there any kind of things that we may miss as a as a point of that, because we're so focused on kind of strategy, that when we're kind of we're ever evolving in terms of technology and advancements. Is there any guidance in terms of things that we should be looking forward to maybe auditing that we may not have foresight at the moment? Do you have any kind of examples in other councils where there may be kind of systems or technologies that we kind of should be looking at, rather than, as well as like the everyday business stuff that we might have missed? I mean, I know that's probably a difficult question, but if you can kind of read between my lines, if you know what I mean.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, and I think it's one of the benefits potentially of being part of a shared service, as you are with our provision, that there's the opportunity to see what other authorities are doing. Also things like near misses at other local authorities, of how would we deal with that if that happened here, as well as the proactive, as you say, of some of the better use of systems and the innovative work as well. So it's something that I do consider when we're developing the audit plan of coverage we have elsewhere, things that we've picked up that we think, oh, actually, have we got the assurance that couldn't happen here, or are we exploring those areas? Artificial intelligence, for example, is something that we've looked at some other local authorities and strategies around that, which is a very new area. And it's useful that when we've looked at it elsewhere, we can compare and contrast a little bit as well. So that's definitely something that we'll bear in mind.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything about this, but Councillor Atherton mentioned, should it be us or should it be scrutiny? And then, you know, the theme has developed a bit. So I thought I would say it as Chair of Scrutiny. Only today I've had a conversation about building into our work programmes something around LGR between now and when the decision's taken, and the theme would largely be about could we actually tap into other authorities who've already got experiences in this. So I'm just flagging up, we don't want to duplicate between the two strands of the work of the two committees. So it might be useful to have some conversations before we firm up around that, because I mean I do agree, and I was agreeing only a few hours ago with the proposal that looking at what's happened elsewhere would be extremely useful, rather than waiting until it's going to be May, June next year before we actually know what the proposal, you know, the firm proposal is going to be. But we know it's going to change, and it's certainly possible to start looking at some of those key areas to start preparing our mindset around some of the issues we'll be facing.
I'm glad you said that, because you're perfectly placed to provide that link between us all, and I'm sure we would at officer level would create that link, so thereby we can not duplicate energies. Just one moment, Alison. Councillor Thwaites.
Actually, Councillor Brown's just actually said it. So thanks.
Then you're on.
It's not a new point. I think Rachel kind of read between my lines and understood what I was on about. I totally agree with the not crossover with the LGA stuff, but Rachel kind of realised that I was talking about future, not the LGA. It was in terms of our progression and future, even if it is for a short period of time, so that we don't miss AI being one of the key areas that's ever evolving, and we need to be aware of and not lose sight of, because of bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freire. Is anyone else would like to contribute to this item? Okay. Well, the recommendation is that the committee notes the proposed approach developing the audit plan for 2026 and 27, and highlights any risk where the committee requires assurance during the year ahead, and the chief auditor shall receive requests from this committee by committee member up until 31st January 2026. Are we prepared to note that? The committee notes it. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, we've got a welcome guest amongst us. We don't often see Tom here. This is a report on the information governance and report and framework update. So I don't know whether you're taking this, Tom, or is it a joint act between Clive and yourself, but mainly you. Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So good evening, members. You have a report tonight, and that's the annual report on to audit and standards on the Council's information governance position. So in September 2023, Audit and Standards adopted the information governance framework for the Council, and essentially that sets out how the Council will manage information governance. And ultimately, there's three practical limbs to that, and that's the data protection and governance limb. Secondly, the information request limb, so things like freedom of information requests and subject access requests. And thirdly, on records and data management. The report provides a detail of what's happened over the last year, and I'll just pick out three of the most important things. Firstly is the legislative update. So the Data Use and Access Act of 2025 received royal assent in June this year. That's brought about numerous changes, and the report details the most relevant ones. The one we would really draw attention to is the new basis for processing, which is where there is a legitimate interest. And the other thing to note is that not everything within that legislation is currently in force yet, so we'll continue to update through these reports as that changes. Secondly is the information governance framework itself. So the Information Governance Working Group meets regularly at the Council, and that's to discuss the information governance approach that we take, any upcoming issues or changes to the landscape, as well as looking at any policy and procedure. One of the current work streams that we'd probably flag at the moment is looking at the digital platform. So SharePoint has come in as being used a lot more now. So we're looking at that and how the data is retained through that and how data is processed, making sure that that is compliant. Lastly is on the reporting element of things. So the framework sets out how we would report on information governance to this committee. And the main thing really is to do with the information requests that we receive. So they're set out within the reports. They're currently lifted from the Council's reporting system. And at the moment, that requires a manual task to be done. So going through the spreadsheets and inputting that in there. As you've already heard, we are bringing a new system that's currently in its technical build phase. That will manage information requests for us, and that will provide a much smoother journey both for members of the public who are making these requests and also the officers who are administering that. It'll also provide us a much better reporting system, so it'll be live reporting as well as a much wider range of things to be able to report on. So what that will ultimately give us is a much better overview. We'll be able to look at any trends, any changes, and be able to prepare better as well. And then just finally, as already been mentioned, that will be audited next year at some point as well, and come back. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom, for that. That's very interesting. I have to say, I did read the report, and I found it very interesting. I find it very informative as well, particularly changes of law and how they're tightening up on the amount of time taken to deal with these requests and searches, and I find that very interesting and very informative. Thank you for that. But I've no questions really. Just to say, other than that, are there anyone with a question? Councillor Atherton?
Yeah, you might be surprised to know I've got a question, Tom, about local government reorganisation and its impact on our governance and processes. My assumption, and indeed the information we've been given for the various briefings, is that any new authority will have to set its own governance processes up from day one. Do we know how that'll work in terms of primacy and conflict resolution between two different systems, where one might be more stringent than the other?
Who would like to field that one? You or
Chair? I'm happy to answer from that. Obviously, don't want to go into the fine detail of the organisation and some of the briefings that you've already had, but I think it's important to pick up that at whatever when we get an announcement, whatever that may be, as to whichever direction of travel, so which submission is going to be implemented, there's two steps that are taken. The first one is to set up a joint committee. That's something we have to do straight away under that structural changes order, and that does the groundwork for the new authority up until the shadow elections. When the shadow elections take place, the new authority is formed for certain purposes. The joint committee disappears. So between that joint committee, which will be running an implementation plan process, which will be engaging with those authorities, they are effectively doing the groundwork for the shadow authority when it takes over. The shadow authority then has the power to make plans. It doesn't deliver services, but it does all the transitional work. So it has to do things like building its own constitution, etc. Now, part of that, there's a long-term piece of work, and all the different work strands are identified in that, which obviously this will be one of them. And I think that I understand your point entirely, that obviously if you've got one very lax policy and one very strong policy, you hope that the strong one's the one that's taken through into the new authority, and you would hope that that's what will be followed. The unfortunate thing is that will be a new authority, and obviously we cannot bind them in any way, because they will be, even as a shadow authority, they are new members, they are a corporate body. We obviously will be feeding in through officers and members of the existing authorities, but of course those decisions will be made by them. So as part of that process of preparing, obviously we want to ensure our policies are as up to date, robust as possible, but also make sure we feed in and have that early engagement with the other authorities to hopefully find that common ground, that we don't want to just leave a mess for that new authority to try and work out what to do. It's about having those discussions as we go along that journey. So short answer is we can't determine exactly what they do, but what we can do is give them as much information and get things as ready as we can, so that they've got that material before them to make those decisions. And that's on all issues, not just on stuff like information governance.
Are you?
So is the end result then, Clive, that the new authority, once it starts in earnest, it takes primacy on all things data protection, etc., and we kind of lose that responsibility because, to all intents and purposes, we don't exist anymore?
Oh, yeah, in the period between the shadow elections and vesting day, we still carry on exactly as we are. We legally deliver services. We have all the obligations that authorities do. In that period, obviously, what you want is to be ready for day one or vesting day. So at that point, regardless of what we and the other authorities have done from this point all the way through the implementation process, through the shadow authority, etc., that falls away, and they become solely responsible. Yeah. So yeah, then. And obviously, I want to be optimistic about it. Hopefully, we put them in the best place we can. And it is even if there are differences between what the different authorities have done up until that point, then they will be following one process, particularly on things like information governance, where it will apply across the whole of the new authority.
Thank you. Councillor Thwaites.
It was just to follow up on that point, and because I'm sure it's been done, because we're not the first one to be doing this, but following on from your GDPR type stuff, because technically the information we hold, the people have agreed for us to hold that data, but not necessarily the new entity. Like I said, I'm sure it's been faced before.
Because the law, the structural changes order, effectively says that from X date, the previous authority's responsibility is taken over by the new one. That means that for all purposes they're transferred. Now, that's not to say there won't be some information governance work to do around it, because obviously it's in law, it's a new processor. The structural changes order says it will happen, but obviously we've got to do our governance around it and make sure that we're not handling things for purposes other than that which we originally obtained the data for, and obviously to ensure that we get our data retention right, or the new authority's data retention right, so that things are carried over. We don't dump all the data we hold with the new authority and not follow through on things that perhaps should be deleted, etc. So that is just a big piece of transition work about what all the authorities hold, and making sure that we carry on the same trajectory, so that we can show that we're only processing for the purposes originally obtained for and retaining it for sufficient period and minimizing data, all those things. So yeah, that's a really big part of that transition process to make sure that you feed in all of that. So yeah, that part will definitely be picked up.
Content. Thank you. Any more observations or questions? Thank you. Okay, I'll move on to the recommendation now, if that's okay. Recommendation is that the committee notes the information governance annual report and framework update, and we're asked to note it. Are we content to note it? Thank you. It is noted. You were pleased to know there's no urgent business I know of, and I've not brought any, so we'll skip over that. Which remains me to thank all the officers that turned up to give a very fulsome report and answer the questions very, very effectively. Thank you very much. And the members too. They're very good questions that were brought out. And I'll close the meeting at 9:20, 7:20. Thank you very much.